This is the third and should be the final installment of the 1956 Ford restoration. It's been going on about a year since the last video, and the first thing I had to do here is to mount the spare tire after I found that the spare tire bracket was not meant for this truck. The long bed trucks use a different bracket, so I had to cut the four legs and weld them in a different configuration. The next order of business was to try to determine what the original wheels would look like. It's very difficult to find original wheels. So what I started out doing was purchasing a wheel off eBay. It was a very rusty 1960 Ford pickup truck, original 15-inch wheel. And I took that wheel and quickly painted it in Ford Colonial White and put one of my new tires on it temporarily so that I could configure the bracket to hold the spare tire. I wanted to see what these wheels and hubcaps would look like, whether the tires I decided on would be the right size or not. I removed the front grille, which they had painted green, and determined that it was not a chrome grille, and get this paint, which was Colonial White Ford, which they used on all the wheels and grills in 1956. And I sanded this down and I painted it and reinstalled it on the truck to get it back to its original look. And put different fog lights on the front with the yellow lenses. It was around this time that I changed to a pointsless ignition system, which I luckily found locally, this particular part number, and it made a big difference in the way the truck run and its dependability. At this point here, I went to the lumber yard to pick up some oak planks to fabricate side rails, racks on the back of the truck. With a long bed, I felt it could use something to break it up a little bit. So after about $350 worth of lumber and some stainless steel bolts and some stain, I ended up with a wood sides for the back. At this point, the truck was getting pretty close to being done, except they had the custom wheels on that I didn't like. So using the 1960 Ford truck rim, I found the size necessary to get this back to original and ordered 5 of these, 1 for the spare, 4 for the main wheels. They came in a primer, and I painted them Ford Colonial White individually, and I bought a new set of hubcaps. So finally I got them all installed on the truck with the original hubcaps, bringing the truck back to its original appearance. I was pretty happy with it, except for the fact that the running boards were discolored and the doors had rust at the bottoms of those doors. The overdrive transmission was very noisy though, and the windshield was all scratched up, and there was no repairing that. So the next order of business was to order a new windshield and pull the old windshield out, and a new windshield seal using the rope method of putting this in. It should have been a straightforward procedure, but it didn't work out that well. For some reason, the windshield I got did not seem to fit the cab very well, and after 3 attempts and 4 helpers with me, we decided to go with the best we could get it and use some black sealant to finish it off. But I'm very satisfied with it. It's a green tinted windshield that matches the other glass. The windshield itself was only $139, but there was over $100 shipping. Now that it was time to start body work, I needed to see if I could match the paint. So I went to the company Colors for their PPG Deltron, which I've used before. Now I realize the paint has gotten more and more expensive year by year, but I was pretty surprised when a quart and a pint of the base coat was more than $800. Of course, on top of that, you have to buy clear coat and clear coat catalyst. I used a scale to measure out two variants. There was a light variant and a dark variant of Vermont green, a color from the 1990s. I sprayed test patterns until I got as best a match as I could, and then I used that ratio to mix a larger quantity of paint. I made use of the Spectrum Universal Paint System, which is available at Harbor Freight, to adapt to my paint gun. So I stripped the running boards down to bare metal all the way down, matching the paint by mixing two different variants to get as close of a match as I could to what was on the truck. These are long bed running boards, which they don't make anymore, so it's best to not do any modifications to them because they would be hard to find, and these are not in bad shape. It was time to tackle the doors. I took the driver's and the passenger doors off individually, and the first step was to remove the old weather stripping and find out what kind of damage was underneath there that needed to be repaired. So doing some welding on the inner door skins and finishing that off, and I ended up welding in bottom panels to get to this point where I could paint the inside before painting the outside. Of course, it takes a lot of taping, and now I have to tape up the inside and flip it over and paint the outside. Tried to blend the paint in, not painting the top door frame because that didn't need it. There were some dust nubs in the paint, and using 3M rubbing compound and some 3000 grit sandpaper, I was able to buff those out. Then the door had to be reinstalled, and all the hardware, window glass, mirrors, etc. had to be put back in. It was quite time consuming, but I was able to do this without causing any damage to the fresh paint. Got the window to crank up and down nice and smooth. Now I'm on the other door here, and you can see some of the welding I had to do to cut and butt that piece in and paint the other side just as I did the first door. Again, this was quite a slow, time-consuming process, and I'm not a professional painter, but I'm quite happy with the results. In order to get the running board off, you have to pull the back fender off. The next step after the bodywork done was to pull the overdrive transmission out of the truck because it was making a horrendous noise, although it did seem to be functioning. This is the first look at the transmission after it came out, and I disassembled it, and I found that there's a planetary gear set that was completely worn out. It was probably just about ready to tear itself apart. So I caught it in time and identified this as an R10 Borg-Warner transmission. And I also pulled the gearbox apart and cleaned it out and found that it was in very good condition. This is the part that I had to buy. They're only available used, but this one cost me over $300, and it was like new. Then I painted the two sections and reassembled it and installed it back into the truck. The next step was the overdrive relay, which looked to be very rusty and very corroded. I purchased a new reproduction relay, and with a little fabrication because the bracket didn't exactly line up, I installed that and checked the wiring. Another tool that was invaluable in servicing this transmission was having the original shop manual and also this booklet put out by the Ford Service Forum in 1956 for Ford mechanics, titled Overdrive Operation and Service. It completely explains the internal mechanisms and operation of the overdrive transmission that was produced by Borg-Warner. The next order of business was to blend the paint at the front panel ahead of the door and the rear panel behind the door. When this vehicle was painted 35 years ago, they ended up with a drip in this panel, so I took care of that.
So
this is newly painted last night. Same batch of paint as I used here. Perfect match. I blended it into the old color up here. This is the old color. Taped it off here and clear coated below. I got to buff this. One last thing was the rivets that hold those door panels should have been black, so I restored those to the original black. So now the truck is back together and looking like it should look in original condition, original interior, original wheels and hubcaps, although I'm using radial tires and because I want to drive this this truck a lot, and upgraded to a amber lens round fog light. So it's yet to be tested on the road, but up in the air the overdrive was functioning normally. We did find some wiring problems with the solenoid and the governor, and the system wasn't wired correctly. Somebody had reversed a couple of wires, so hopefully this is the end, and she's back to her original condition and hopefully operates smooth and quiet on the highway. Thanks for watching.